Hi guys, happy Monday. Today we're going to talk about the Aztec Empire. So this is the slideshow that we would typically go through in class, but with me being out today, we're going to do it this way. As we go, I'm going to be underlining just like I would in class. And after each slide, I'm going to stop and ask you guys and put a pause on the ed puzzle and ask you guys to please add in the information that I have underlined with that particular color. So your categories, remember, are location, religion, social structure, government, agriculture, time period, technology. If you have version 2, you also have a category called architecture. So just keep that in mind, okay? So on the first slide here, we do have our time period written at the very top. Our time period was 1100 CE to 1522 CE. So make sure that when we pause, you add that in. This is similar to some of our other empires that we've kind of taken a look at, but we'll check that out a little later and compare that across the board. Um, the Aztecs were located in central Mexico. Their capital city was Tenochtitlan with a population of over 250,000 people. Their city had marketplaces, paved roads, and palaces. Aztecs grew and sold different types of corn. They even built floating gardens by weaving sticks together to create a giant raft. And they piled mud from the bottom of the lake to the top of the raft to create 3 feet worth of soil. So there's a couple categories that we're going to hit in here. The first one being location. Location is that purple. We've already kind of talked about this, but it was located in central Mexico with their capital city being Tenochtitlan. Part of their government also includes their population with 250,000 people. Now, some of the things that they created, their technology pieces that we have talked about, they were one of the first civilizations to have paved roads. And if you're talking about architecture as well in version 2, that's something you can add with those paved roads and those palaces. Those are important. Now, for food, they grew and sold different types of corn. So if you have one thing that you remember in terms of like food for the Aztec Empire, they definitely included corn. Okay, so that was one of their big things. One of the other things that they made and created was also these floating gardens. So this would also be part of technology. So I'd like you to stop here. I'll put a note screen up and I want you to add in these pieces of location, government, technology, and agriculture. All right, and for the next part, some of the other things that they also grew were onions, peppers, avocado, and tomatoes. So we can include this with our agriculture piece, but their main form of money was cocoa beans. That was their big form of money that they used in this civilization. So we can put this part with government. Okay. Aztec Empire was destroyed in 1521 because of the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez and his people. This we saw in our brain pop video, how we talked about smallpox taking over the civilization, as well as their translator who didn't, who was kind of tricking everybody and going in favor of the Spanish conquistadors. So again, I'm going to pause right here and I'd like you guys to get this written in before we switch over. You're writing these into your graphic organizer under the categories. So we have agriculture there in red and we have government there in blue. All right, here we go. And let me clear the screen. All right, so some of the other amazing advancements, which some of these things we have already talked about and I've shown you, but we're going to cover them again. They created causeways for transportation. So because Tenochtitlan, if you remember, was built on in the middle of Lake Texcoco, their city was an island, so they had to build causeways to travel to and from the city. So this goes under technology as well because these are advancements. So we can include causeways. All right. Next up, we have stone aqueducts. Because they were surrounded by water, most of this water was undrinkable. So they had to create stone aqueducts that transported clean drinking water into the cities. So again, something that they created, that would be those aqueducts. Okay. Next up was the Machucutl. Aztecs armies used those wooden swords with obsidian blades. So we're not going to worry about the real fancy term. We're just going to stick with the wooden swords. Okay, and that obsidian is a very strong piece of stone, so it was much more lethal than what some of their other some of the other civilizations were using. And this one we've already talked about, the Chimpanzees. They were floating gardens. They put soil on the rafts that were anchored by trees. I'm not going to underline this one because we've already talked about it on the last slide. So all these things being advancements, these are all pieces of technology. So I'm going to pause the screen here, and I'd like you guys to please add these into your graphic organizer as well. All right, I'm going to move it on. Here we go. All right. And finally, this is their society, their social structure. So this entire slide is going to be yellow. Now, we've covered all the other categories already with several of the other, with our reading article, especially with religion being the big one. In our article, we talked very heavily about religion. So we're going to cover more of the government and social structure here in this slide, okay? So at the top of the social structure, these were your rulers, who were your kings. They ruled the entire Aztec Empire, and they were in charge of all the law and trade that happened. Now, underneath your kings, these were your nobles. So these are people that were like your tax collectors and your government officials. In the Incan Empire, we call these public administrators. Those would be the similar position. Underneath your nobles were your priests. So in some of the other empires, we saw that nobles were actually below the priests. Priests had more authority, but here we're seeing that the nobles are ahead of those priests. Okay, and these are, your priests were in charge of everything religion based, including the calendars and keeping the tradition by passing it down. In the Aztec Empire, the warriors actually were a part of their own class. So they conquered land, they brought wealth to their empire, and they were highly respected. And they also were the ones who captured the victims for the different religious sacrifices. So these were the people that were used for the priest those 18 times a year to give tribute to the gods. Underneath our warriors were your merchants and your artisans. So merchants, again, are people who sell goods in the marketplace. Many were very rich. Artisans create goods such as headdresses, jewelry, clothes, anything like that. And then at the very bottom of your society were your farmers and your slaves. So these are the ones that grew, your farmers grew your crops. Slaves were often captured in battle, and they were sold as laborers to work in the fields. So because this is part of social structure, just make sure that you have this added in. All of these things here go in with social structures. That's why they're all getting underlined in yellow. Some of you may already have this on your graphic organizer. Just make sure you have them all on there so that way they're separated. Now, one part I want to add into the government category, your nobles are also your government officials. They're both. Um, and then these are positions that were passed down from fathers. So these were kept within the bloodlines. That was part of the Aztec society, was making sure that these positions continued down, all these government positions. Your king also was obviously a part of the government. He was the one who was in charge of law. So just make sure you have that in there as well. All right, guys. And that is all I have for you to add to your notes. So I will make sure that I pause it here before the end. Please add all these into your notes. I will also update my master copy for you guys in case you need to copy and paste over anything you missed from the Incan and Aztec Empire. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions today, guys. And I hope you have an absolutely wonderful Monday. I'll see you later.